After watching the first Infinite Castle movie, one thing became clear: Ufotable is no longer competing with anyone. It's no longer just that they animate well, we all know that, but what they're doing goes above and beyond. It's a constant demonstration that they're in a league of their own. While other studios alternate between good and bad projects, Ufotable remains at the top, without any falls, without any bumps, and with increasing ambition each time. This movie didn't come to surprise us. It came to confirm what many of us already knew. Ufotable is unstoppable, and in this video I don't want to repeat what I've already mentioned in other videos about animation, but rather talk about what the first Infinite Castle movie represented. Why is Ufotable so different? When we talk about Ufotable, it's very easy to fall into the obvious, to say that they have incredible animation, that their effects are crazy, that the CGI is integrated. It's all true. But if we reduce the Ufotable phenomenon to visual quality alone, we fall short, because the studio's true merit is not in the fact that they did something impressive once, it's in what they've been doing consistently for years. They don't have just one star project and the rest are forgettable. They have a track record where the level is maintained, even when the industry in general is collapsing. And that's not common. It's almost unnatural in the context of current anime. The industry is saturated, production schedules are increasingly aggressive, studios work against the clock, and the animators live on the edge. That leads to many anime having good moments, but also weak episodes, recycled animation, and it's part of the system, but Ufotable doesn't fit into that system. They broke the mold, but they didn't do it just with one episode or one movie, as is the case in most cases. They did it with the entire project from day one. Episode 19 was a turning point, it's true, but from the first episodes you could see that something was different. Then came the Infinite Train, and that was the confirmation, the Red Light District, the Blacksmith Village, the training of the pillars, and now the Infinite Castle. And in none of those sections did they lower the level, a level of demand that most studios can't sustain for even a couple of weeks. They have been maintaining and surpassing it year after year, while other studios focus on delivering what they can, with the resources and time they have. Ufotable simply doesn't deliver anything until it's perfect, and that's the difference. That's why each new release isn't just a new episode or a new movie, it's an event. And this is where the Infinite Castle comes in, because I honestly don't think anyone was surprised by how it turned out. We all expected it. We all already knew what we were going to see. The shock didn't come from the quality, but from the confirmation that they are still firmly at the top. There were no drops, there was no decrease in budget, and there was no wear and tear. On the contrary, there was more ambition, more detail, and more technical complexity. All this after maintaining the same pace for years. That makes UFO unstoppable. It's very easy for a studio to have its moment of glory, but those peaks coexist with other weaker, rushed, and less cared for projects, because studios have to produce all the time, but Ufotable only produces when it knows it can smash it. They don't get carried away by the schedule or the pressure. They don't release 20 anime a year or 3 movies at the same time. They make one and make it perfect. And that approach that seems so basic in theory is exactly what sets them above the rest. Because what other studios can't guarantee consistency for Ufotable is the minimum standard. That's why the Infinite Castle wasn't a surprise, it was a confirmation. The confirmation of what we saw in episode 19 wasn't a stroke of luck. What was seen in the Infinite Train wasn't its peak, and what we saw in the Red Light District or in the Village of the Blacksmiths wasn't a streak. It's simply like a work of art. And if after so many years they continue delivering at this level, we have to stop talking about miracles and start accepting reality. Ufotable is not good. It is consistent, and that consistency, in a context as exhausting as that of current anime, is what makes them unstoppable. If Ufotable has maintained this high level for years, it is not by magic or luck, nor is it simply because they have talented animators who have done. The main reason lies in their work method, a work method that we have already discussed more than once. Ufotable works in a very different way from the rest of the big studios in the industry, and that explains why their results are also on another level. To begin with, Ufotable is one of the few studios that controls almost all stages of production internally, from the script to post-production, including 2D animation, cinematography, effects, color, composition. Everything goes through their hands. They do not outsource like other studios. They do not distribute tasks among dozens of subcontractors. They have their own team specifically designed for their production style, and that allows them to work with a unified vision where each shot feels like part of a complete work and not like a patchwork of multiple different teams. This also means they have more creative control by not relying on external studios or fragmented production lines. They take the time to fine-tune every detail, and that time is key because while most studios work with impossible schedules and fixed deadlines, Ufotable has a different logic. They don't release anything until it's ready, and we saw that in the Infinite Castle arc. They could have made a TV season, as usual. They could have divided the content into weekly episodes and finished it in 3 months, but no, they decided to make it a trilogy of films, and that's not just done to look better, it's done to work with more freedom, more planning, and more focus on quality than on rushing. Another key point is their way of working with CGI. While other studios use it as a resource to speed up the work, Ufotable treats it as part of their visual language. He doesn't use it to replace scenes, but to enrich them. The Ufotable is so integrated with the 2D from the design of the backgrounds, the scenarios, and the camera movements. That's why when the Infinite Castle moves or when we see structures floating or rotating, everything feels natural. It never gives the impression that we're watching something foreign to the general style. Even if you don't like the CGI with Ufotable, you probably won't notice, because his priority is not for the effect to be realistic, but for it to work within the aesthetics of the work. In addition, he has a very defined visual style. All his projects share a strong visual identity, intense lighting, particle effects with each hit, saturated colors, a constantly moving camera. It's not a realistic style. It's an expressive style, and the best thing is that they apply it coherently. It's not just pretty animation, it's a complete system. That's why when you see a fight from Kimetsu or Fate, you know instantly that it's Ufotable. They have their own visual mark, something that very few studios manage to maintain with such clarity. But none of this would be possible if they didn't have the support to do it. Ufotable isn't tied to a production chain like a map where they have to fulfill several orders per year to survive. A solid relationship of trust with Annex allowed them to produce with longer deadlines and more stable conditions. The production committee doesn't demand immediate results, it gives them space, and Ufotable takes advantage of that space to do what it knows best, building each episode or movie as if it were a work of art. They don't release 4 anime per season, they release one every so often, but they leave it impeccable. That motto isn't easy to replicate, but it's what allows them to do things like Infinite Castle. Added to that is their internal stability. Unlike other studios where animators come and go depending on the project, at Ufotable, many of their key animators and directors are permanent members of the studio for years. This creates much more fluid communication, a shared work culture, and greater coordination between departments. They're not assembling a team from scratch for each new anime. They already have a consolidated structure, and it shows. There are no inconsistencies, no good episodes and weak episodes. The quality is consistent, episode after episode, fight after fight. It's also important to mention that they're not overproducing content. Most studios these days are in factory mode. They have to release something new all the time to stay relevant, but it's a luxury to say, we're not going to release anything this year, but next year we'll release something that no one else can do. These are risky decisions, but at the same time, it's what allows them to maintain such a high technical and artistic level. And the craziest thing is that it works, because the audience doesn't forget about them. On the contrary, every time they come back, they do so with such force that they steal all the tension. It doesn't matter if they haven't released anything for a year. When they come back, everyone is waiting. And finally, their way of presenting the content also adds value. They don't just make anime content, they create experiences from movie theaters to special events, from synchronized releases to trailers that look like animated shorts. Ufotable cares not only about the product, but also about the way in which the audience receives it. Everything is designed to generate impact, and that, added to the rest, is what builds its reputation, not as a good studio, but as the studio. In today's anime industry, there are many studios that stand out. Mappa with Cloverworks, and we could go on. But the truth is that when it comes to large-scale production with consistent quality, none of them seriously compete with UFL. And this is not to disparage the others, but to recognize that the model that Ufotable uses is unlike anyone else's. While other studios have multiple productions in parallel, which forces them to divide resources, delegate tasks, and work under pressure, Ufotable is dedicated to a single project at a time and takes it to the next level. They don't have to maintain 5 active franchises or answer to production committees. That already puts them in a different position. They decide when and how they want to work, and that leeway is what allows them to polish each scene as if it were a masterpiece. The relationship that Ufotable Alex Yesia has is extremely important. Few studios have the same level of trust and creative freedom that they have, and that is something that cannot be bought with money. It is earned with results. After the impact of the first season and the Infinite Train, the studio became a luxury partner for publishers and distributors. They don't need to prove anything. They are given time, budget, and space to do things their way, And that makes a huge difference compared to other studios that work on commission with constant commercial pressure and absurd delivery time. There's also a question of identity. Many large studios work with different teams on each series, and that means that the visual style varies greatly from one project to another. But at Ufotable, they have a clear brand, an instantly recognizable visual personality. When you see a Ufotable anime, you can't get confused. You know it's theirs by the use of light, the effects, the direction, the way they build each space. They have a signature like a film director with their own style. That's not what you see in studios that are jumping from franchise to franchise. Most of them adapt to the material they're given. Ufotable adapts the material, but also transforms it into their own language. And perhaps most importantly, UFO doesn't compete with the others because it's not in the same race. It's not a mass producer. It's not aiming to be on everyone's lips all the time. Their strategy is completely different. They disappear, work in silence, and when they come back, they break through everything. They don't need to be within anime all year long to be relevant. A one-off premiere is enough for everyone to talk about them. And that's something that can only be achieved when the audience trusts their work blindly. Today, almost no studio can follow the same path, not because they don't have the talent, but because the system they work in doesn't allow them to. Ufotable is an isolated case, almost a successful experiment in an industry in chaos. That's why, when we talk about competition, we have to understand that Ufotable has stopped looking the other way. It's not trying to outdo others. It's forging its own path at its own pace and with a quality that no one else can consistently match today. Infinite Castle didn't come to prove that they're on par with the best. It came to make it clear that right now there's no one else on the same level. When it was announced that the Infinite Castle arc wouldn't be adapted as just another season, but as a trilogy of films, there were mixed reactions. Some saw it as a marketing ploy and others thought it was a more elegant way to close the story. But after watching the first film, it's clear that this decision wasn't just about commercial storytelling, it was a statement of principles on Ufotable's part. The studio could have taken the easy route. They could have made another season for television, kept the episodic format, or even split the content into 2 parts and sold it, as is done with many long-form productions. But no, they chose the more complex and risky option, adapting the longest arc of the manga into 3 consecutive films. And that's not something you do if you don't intend to leave your mark. The Infinite Castle is an action-packed arc with multiple battlefronts, constant set changes, and a scale that surpasses anything seen before Senprimetsu. It's literally the climax of the story, but by deciding to tell it in a trilogy format, Ufotable has not only secured themselves more time and freedom to work, but they've also raised the bar, and that's noticeable from the very first minute of the film. Everything is designed to impress. The number of animators, the backgrounds, the camera movement, the sound design, the lighting. There's not a single scene that feels transitional or filler. Every shot delivers what it needs to deliver. Every fight is crafted to be unforgettable. Even the most deliberate movements are packed with visual detail. It's a production that doesn't let up, not because it's fast-paced, but because it's constantly reminding us that we're watching something special. And what's most interesting is that they're not doing this to show off. This isn't empty spectacle. Everything serves a clear vision, a film that doesn't try to overthrow Kimetsu or radically change its style, but rather takes everything that's been built up over the years to the highest possible point, a culmination, a way of showing that all the progress made so far has served to reach this moment stronger than ever. So, beyond the technical aspects, what Infinite Castle demonstrates is that Ufotable is still hungry. They're not settling for past success, they're not slowing down or repeating the formula, they're betting harder than ever, and the first film made it clear, they still have a lot to offer. One of the most impressive things about Ufotable has nothing to do with how many frames per second they animate or that they also integrate CGI. It has to do with the way they present their content, because at this point, each new Ufotable release isn't experienced as just another chapter or movie, it's experienced as an event. The first film, Infinite Castle, proved it once again. It doesn't matter that we already knew what was going to happen or the months of waiting to see it outside of Japan. On a global level, the premiere was an event. The entire community revolved around Kimetsu. Going back to talking about the studio, discussing scenes, Japan already set a box office record. Theaters were packed, merchandising multiplied, and all of that without the need for big viral campaigns. Ufotable already has that effect, and this is nothing new. Ever since episode 19 exploded, Kimetsu has never been just an anime again. Each season, each new trailer, each announcement generates more anticipation because the audience has already understood that what is sufficient is not just content, it is experience. It is not another well-animated episode, it is a high-impact moment, something that one wants to see as soon as it comes out. It doesn't matter if the content lasts 20 minutes or 3 hours. It doesn't matter if you see it in the cinema or on a platform. When you see it, you know that something big is coming, something that won't happen every day, and that is entirely due to the studio, because anyone can have a stroke of luck, but generating that level of expectation over and over again, with consistency, quality, and without wear and tear, is another story.